Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today we're going to take something a little bit different, something I got new in the mail, and no, it's not this. This is actually an old thing of mine, but this is an RPG product that I've been putting off for a long time, been looking at for a very long time, been scrutinizing for a very long time, and it's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's why I've put it off for so long, but I am really upset that I did put it off for so long, because now that I've actually received it, I'm blown away, to be honest with you. This is my original copy of J.R.R. Tolkien's Silmarillion. This was given to me as a gift when I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 13 years old, 14 years old, if that, maybe a little younger. It doesn't have the dust jacket anymore, but it does have this beautiful embossing of thing. And so today we're going to talk about Tolkien's world as it is portrayed in role-playing games, and I've been a little wary because a lot of the times that I've tried to experience my interpretation or my vision of Tolkien's world in a role-playing setting, I've been kind of burnt, been kind of led astray, or it hasn't just really fit what I envisioned Tolkien's world to be. And that being said, MERP, Middle-earth role-playing game, came out way back in the day, probably mid-'80s. And it's a beautiful game. It's well-researched, but it just didn't quite fit my interpretation. And I've tried to make lots of other games fit the bill. The closest one I've come to is Burning Wheel. But even then, it sort of leaves things out, and it leaves a lot of work to be done in order to accomplish that Tolkien feel, and the ability to play in Tolkien's Middle-earth. D&D, in 2nd edition, tried very hard to make that fit as well, too, when I was younger, first getting into the hobby, and D&D was just too magic heavy. It was too intense in the way it's created, and nothing bad about D&D. D&D will always have a very special place in my heart, but it just didn't fit the bill until now. I just received these in the mail the other day, but this is Adventures in Middle-earth for 5th edition D&D, and this is created by Cubicle 7, which is a company out of England, and they are the creators of the One Ring RPG, and I never pulled the trigger on that, only because it seemed to me like it fit the setting very well, but I wasn't a really big fan of the way the dice mechanic worked. And I've been playing D&D in a D20 system since 1991-92, so I'm very, very familiar with it, and I've been putting off pulling the trigger on this product because of what I said before, that D&D never really fit the bill. I've been doing a lot of research, been watching a lot of videos on these, and I think the Cubicle 7 did an amazing job of capturing that Middle-earth feel. The first thing I look for right out of the gate in a game that's about Middle-earth is how it treats the elves. The elves were an extremely important part of Tolkien's vision and his entire breadth of work and writing. In the Silmarillion, the story about the elves is basically 85 to 90% of this. And so I've always been enthralled by Tolkien's view of the elves and his creation of the elves, and thus it's always the first thing I look for when I go into a game is how the game treats the elves. I think in regular D&D, in regular Dungeons & Dragons, because of play balance and because of play fairness, the elves have always been sort of dumbed down is not the right word. They've been sort of short-shifted. They've been sort of minimized in a way so that they fit with all the other races in the world. And that's just fit play balance. And I've never seen it done in such a good way as that it truly captures Tolkien's feel of the elves. These being immortal beings who have been around for centuries. They remember the old days. They remember the first era. Most of them do. And their time is now waning, and they're ready to leave Middle-earth and basically put it into the hands of men. And that's a scary thing for them because it's been their homeland for ever, basically. And excuse me. And they it's it's a hard thing for them to basically hand over the caretaking of Middle-earth to a race that is young, a race that is very fallible, and a race that is not trustworthy. So the first thing I did was I cracked this book open and I took a look at the elf culture, what they call them in here. They're not races, they're cultures. And I'll flip to that now to show you what I'm talking about. I guess I should have page marked this, but unprepared as always. Here we are, the Elves of Mirkwood. Now, in this game, the default setting is in and around the Wilderlands. And that encompasses like the Lonely Mountain, Erebor, Lake Town, all those, the Dale, the Mirkwood, all those areas. So the Shire is still very far to the west, and so it focuses mostly on the elves of Mirkwood as one of the player races, or cultures, as they call them in this game. I believe that Cubicle 7 did an amazing job at capturing the feel of Tolkien's elves in a D20 or D&D type setting. And it's never, to my knowledge, been done before. Or at least into my viewpoint of what I think the elves should be like. They should feel immortal. They should feel different. They should feel more powerful than some of the other races. Because they are. They really, truly are. And the only way that they're immune to sicknesses, they're immune to old age. The only way to die is by violence, basically. And I think that they've done a very, very good job at sort of capturing that feel in this game. And so that was the first thing. And I flipped through when I forgot to this, and I was extremely excited, and thus dove deeper into this game. Some of the things that they've added, the D20 system basically has gone unchanged. Plays just like it does out of the D&D Player's Handbook, with the addition of a few things. And this is a part that made me a little bit wary until I really took a chance, took some time to read through this, and to also, I wanted to throw this into, I received this as well too, the Lore Master's Guide, which is basically the Dungeon Master's Guide. In Middle-earth, they call them the Lore Master. And so some of the things that they've added and some of the things they've changed is the journey rules. And I was a little wary of how that was going to play out until I actually got a chance to read through them. And I'm highly, highly impressed. And the more and more I thought about it, and the more I sort of reflected back on Tolkien's works, I realized that it made perfect sense. Sometimes Tolkien gets criticized for how much his characters walk, how much they travel, how much they journey through the books. That a majority of the book is just are just the characters traveling to and from certain places. In a world that Tolkien has created, in the Middle-earth that Tolkien has created, it makes perfect sense to me. We're talking about a world that is not filled with metropolises, that is not filled with gigantic, major, sprawling cityscapes, or an amassing of tons of little towns, like some other high fantasy sort of settings. Forgotten Realms comes to mind, Dragonlance, those kinds of things. We're talking about a very sort of like early medieval type setting where there would be a city, and then there would be hundreds of miles of wilderness between that and the next major settlement. There might be a few farmers here and there and whatnot, but the travel time between two different places would have been extensive, and especially if you're traveling by foot or even by horse. And this goes into great detail on how those things work and how far you can travel in a day, and sort of things that you're going to need, like rations, food, and it goes into detail about things like weariness and exhaustion, and the things that happen during a journey, and the time that you actually get to the place that you're heading towards. Your characters might already be, exhausted. They might be hungry. They might be cold. They might be miserable. They may have fallen into a bit of corruption from the shadow and stuff as well too. My wariness about this whole thing was that it would be, a majority of the game. And it's really, really not. It does stay very true to the fact that the adventuring phase, which would be the typical D&D type of setting, where you're actually doing, combating monsters and exploring different types of ruins and interacting with other NPCs and stuff, is all still here. And the journeying rules only take up a small portion of this book, or these books, and it just sets up the sort of what happens at the end of that journey, but can be narrated in such a way that it brings a lot of life to the game. It brings a lot of life to the characters themselves, and I think that's a really awesome addition, a very nice tweak that they've added to this game. It's not recommended to skip over those things like you do in most D&D games, where, like, hey, we're traveling from such and such city to another such and such city, and you just say, well, nothing happens on the journey in between. That's very important in this game, what happens during the journey, and the types of things. There could be encounters during the journey. You could be, you could be sabotaged while you're on the journey. It could be weather affects the journey. It could be clear and free sailing. It could be a great time. But if you read Tolkien's works, and you know Tolkien's works well, you realize that was a major part of character development, was, this idea that Sam and Frodo heading towards, Mount Doom, and it was a sort of growth and fall of their characters, and it really brought life to them, and brought a sort of like a humanity to them, a realism to their characters and the things that they suffered and suffered, as well as sort of succeeded at in their journeys as well too. So highly excited about this game. I haven't had a chance to play it, but I have read through both of these books, and I'm super excited. This has gotten me very, very excited for D&D 5th edition again now. I really, really want to run a campaign in this world. I've ordered a few of the other books that are available, and I'm highly anticipating them showing up as well too. I think this is definitely be one of the series of books that I will keep in my library, and it just makes for good reading as well too. There's a lot of great timelines and history in here. If you're not super familiar with Tolkien's works, but maybe you've read The Hobbit, you've read Lord of the Rings once or something like that, there's a nice refresher of all of the timeline and major settings and places in these books as well too. The artwork is amazing. This is very, very beautiful. I mean, this is, this is John Howe's artwork, who's been very famous and doing lots of different Tolkien types works. I'm not sure if this is John Howe or not on this one, but this is definitely taken from The Hobbit. You can see Frodo here and all the dwarven companions, and they're traveling through, the spiders of Mirkwood. This is their thing here, but the interior of these are beautiful as well too. The maps are just fantastically drawn. Cubicle 7 has done an amazing job with this. So this is a layout of Lake Town, and just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Again, in the back here, some beautiful maps. This is a map that's used for the lore master. I almost said game master. And it's used in his determination of what types of terrain you move through on your journey, as well as how it affects your journey and stuff as well. But the layouts of these are just fantastically gorgeous. Really, really great stuff. It does talk about magic. That's the other thing that's very important about Tolkien's world, is that the magic in Middle Earth is very different than what you would find in a typical D&D setting. And typical D&D, there's wizards flinging fireballs and lightning bolts and magic missiles and stuff. In Tolkien's world, magic was a much more subdued type of thing, and it was a force that was extremely powerful, but sort of played underneath. The power of the One Ring and the other rings that were out there. Some of the swords and stuff as well, and some of the elvish magic being mostly like, in healing herbs and stuff as well. But they go into great detail about this. There are no magic playing character classes in this, unless you want to. The Lore Master's Guide does give you direction on how to do that if you want. But the only people who actually used magic per se in Middle Earth were able to wield magic were beings that were far beyond any of the player characters' capabilities. Gandalf and Radagast and Saruman and Sauron. And these were all. Gandalf was not a normal person. He was an Ishtari. He was an actual, I guess, like Tolkien's version of an angel. He was sort of like a angelic type being who'd come to help and aid in the battle. But he was not like a normal magic user. And they make reference to, in Tolkien's books, the necromancer, which is actually just one of the guises of Sauron. But again, Sauron being one of the gods, one of the original champions of Morgoth, and him being sort of beyond any sort of mortal playing character, or any of the elves as well too. So magic is very sort of like subdued in this, but it does give you ways to use it. If you prefer to use magic in Middle Earth, you can do that. It does give you some ideas on what spells would be appropriate and that kind of thing. It also gives you details on things like heirloom magic and magical, the effects of elves, and as far as like healing and creation of magical items the elves and the dwarves had as well too. So I highly recommend Adventures in Middle Earth if you're a Tolkien fan, or you're just interested in any of this adventuring in Tolkien's world. Please check these out. This is the closest thing I've found to what my vision of, and I don't want to say this is this is the hands down, this is the way to go. This is the end and be all and end all of Tolkien's sort of vision or whatever, but to me, in my vision of what Middle Earth is, it fits very, very well, and it's exciting to me to be able to find a game that I'm comfortable with in playing, and as well as excited about in sharing my vision of what Tolkien's Middle Earth is. And I think that's about it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the section down below, and I'd love to talk with you about this anytime. And I'd love to share a game at some point with you as well too. So until next time, I'm Questwise, and we're out.